Look at these ethanol dispensers popping up at gas stations across India. They represent a massive national effort to cut down on expensive crude oil imports and lower carbon emissions by mixing regular petrol with ethanol. But hitting the country's aggressive But that drop in price accidentally created a highly lucrative invisible loop for scammers to exploit. This diagram breaks down a concept called arbitrage. It happens when you buy a generic item in one market for cheap and instantly sell that exact same item in a different market for a higher price, guaranteeing a profit. In the first market, the government buys crops from farmers at a minimum support price, a high rate to keep the sector stable. But in the second market, the government sells that exact same rice to ethanol plants for pennies. Whenever you engineer a physical commodity to have two completely different price tags based purely on who is buying it, you invite a risk-free money-printing loop, unless your oversight is flawless. That flaw was recently exposed in Madhya Pradesh. Hundreds of quintals of highly subsidized rice were logged leaving a state depot, legally designated for an ethanol plant in Chhindwara. But those loaded transport trucks never made it to the distillery. Instead, they veered off the main highways. Their actual destination was a massive network of unregistered private rice mills operating entirely outside the green energy supply chain. Inside those mills, operators performed a simple magic trick. They took the heavily discounted government rice, ran it through their processing machines, and repackaged it into fresh sacks so it looked like a newly harvested crop. The scammers then took those disguised sacks right back to the Food Corporation of India, selling the government its own subsidized rice at the premium guaranteed farmer rate. This created an infinite loop. The state was repeatedly buying its own stockpile, paying a massive 400% to 600% markup every single time the exact same rice circled through the system. A fraud of this physical scale requires massive systemic blind spots, starting with a complete lack of end-to-end digital traceability. The entire transit process relied on weak, easily falsified paper documentation. Without live GPS tracking on the cargo, once a truck left the depot, it effectively vanished from official view. Pulling off this disappearing act required a highly organized network. It points to coordination between the transport operators moving the goods, the mill owners repackaging them, and corrupt officials stamping the paperwork. Millions of dollars drained from the public treasury, entirely because a multi-billion-dollar green energy policy was built on top of an unmonitored analog supply chain. Down the line, the physical consequences are severe. With the raw materials hijacked, authorized distilleries are starved of the rice they need, halting the actual production of green ethanol. Because that fuel never enters the market, the nation's oil marketing companies are left with completely empty tanks, forcing them to miss those crucial 20% domestic ethanol to mix into the petrol supply. The country remains highly dependent on the massive oil tankers bringing in expensive foreign crude. The rice diversion actively sabotages national energy security and continually drains the country's foreign exchange reserves. To stop the bleeding, regulators are finally shifting their strategy. Instead of just tracking the raw materials leaving the warehouse, they are strictly auditing the final product. This flowchart illustrates the new mandate. Distilleries are now mathematically accountable for their production. A specific volume of subsidized input rice must convert exactly into a specific volume of liquid ethanol output. If a private plant buys 100 tons of subsidized crop but fails to deliver the corresponding barrels of fuel, the equation breaks down and triggers an immediate audit. You can write ambitious green energy targets and fund them with massive public subsidies, but they will only succeed if the physical infrastructure of transparency is exactly as robust as the financial incentives.